Some people speak to be heard. Others speak to be seen. But Sigma INFJs have learned that the most powerful truths often don't need to be spoken at all. They know when to withdraw, when to observe, when to let silence carry more meaning than words ever could. In a world addicted to noise, attention, and over-explaining, the Sigma INFJ silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's clarity. It's power. This isn't the silence of confusion or avoidance. This is the silence of someone who has already processed everything and decided that saying nothing is the most intelligent response. Here's why. Part 1. Silence is the language of control. The Sigma INFJ doesn't speak just to fill space. They speak with intention, if at all. Because they understand something most people miss. The person who speaks less often controls the room. When everyone else is rushing to be heard, their silence shifts the energy. People start paying attention. Start leaning in. Start wondering what they're thinking. That's not manipulation. It's presence. And it's one of the quietest forms of power. Letting people reveal themselves while you stay steady, unseen, and unreadable. Part 2. Silence protects their truth from dilution. Some truths are too sacred to be thrown into casual conversation. Too layered to be flattened into explanation. Too intuitive to be understood by someone not attuned to their frequency. Sigma INFJs have learned that speaking prematurely often cheapens what they carry. When they try to explain something still forming inside them, it loses its weight. So they wait. They observe. They let the truth ripen until it's either ready to be spoken or no longer needs to be said at all. They don't fear being misunderstood. They fear wasting insight on ears that aren't ready to hear. Part 3. They watch more than they speak. Sigma INFJs are natural pattern readers. They don't need to ask 1,000 questions to understand someone. They watch. They listen between the lines. They sense the emotional current behind your words. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's analysis. Every interaction is data. Every moment of stillness is another piece of the puzzle. People often interpret their quiet as disinterest. But in truth, that silence is where the most precise judgments are made. And when they do speak, it's often brief, sharp, unfiltered, and exactly on point. Part 4. Words can be used against you, silence can't. Sigma INFJs have learned, often through betrayal, that not everyone deserves full access to their inner world. They've seen how vulnerable truths can be weaponized, how authenticity can be misread, how emotional openness can become emotional liability. So they adapted. They don't lie. They don't evade. They simply say less. Because silence can't be distorted. It can't be misquoted. It can't be twisted to serve someone else's narrative. In a world that thrives on twisting words, they've mastered the art of not offering any. Part 5. They know the emotional cost of speaking. Every time the Sigma INFJ speaks, they calculate the cost. Not just in time or attention, but in emotional energy. They don't speak to be included. They don't argue to be right. They don't vent for the sake of reaction. They ask themselves, will this help or harm? Will this deepen or dilute the moment? Will this truth land in a place that can hold it? If the answer is no, they stay silent. Because their peace is worth more than temporary validation. And silence, when chosen with discernment, is a currency they won't waste. Part 6. Strategic silence ends arguments before they begin. When tension rises, most people escalate. The Sigma INFJ exits, sometimes emotionally, sometimes physically. They've learned that silence is often more disarming than any well-crafted comeback. Because arguments require fuel. And silence starves them. They don't argue to win. They don't explain to soothe egos. They don't react to bait. Instead, they go still. They withdraw their energy. And in doing so, they take the oxygen out of the fire. Some call it avoidance. But it's not. It's wisdom sharpened by experience. You don't have to attend every battle you're invited to. Part 7. People reveal themselves when you stop talking. There's a psychological principle Sigma INFJs understand intuitively. The less you say, the more others reveal. In the space of their silence, people rush to fill the void. They over-explain. They expose intentions. They show their insecurities. Sigma INFJs create this space deliberately. Not to manipulate, but to listen deeply. They discovered that by speaking less, they hear more. Not just what's said, but what's hidden. And what they discover in those quiet spaces often tells them more than 1,000 conversations ever could. Part 8. They use silence as a boundary. Sometimes, the most powerful boundary a Sigma INFJ can set is no response. Not because they're being passive-aggressive. Not because they're punishing anyone. But because they decided the interaction no longer deserves their energy. They don't ghost out of spite. They withdraw out of finality. Their silence says, "This is no longer in alignment with who I am." And they don't always announce that shift, because silence, by itself, is closure. It says what words never can. Access denied. Peace preserved. Part 9. They're not trying to be mysterious, they just value privacy. The Sigma INFJ doesn't withhold information to appear deep. They simply don't view openness as a requirement for connection. They can love you and still keep parts of themselves private. They can engage with warmth while keeping their core untouched. It's not a game. It's a philosophy. Your inner world is yours. Protect it like sacred ground. And because they don't need to be known to feel real, they don't give in to pressure to explain, reveal, or narrate every experience. They let others wonder. Because if someone needs constant access to feel close, that's not intimacy. That's entitlement. Part 10. They understand that truth has its own timing. Not everything needs to be said now. Some truths need time to breathe. Some insights need space to unfold. Some decisions need to remain unspoken until they're fully embodied. Sigma INFJs are patient with their truth. They don't rush to articulate it. They wait for the right moment, or choose not to speak it at all. Because they've realized that silence doesn't delay truth. Sometimes, silence is the truth. In its most dignified, powerful form. And when they do finally speak, you can be sure it's not reaction. It's resolution. Conclusion, their silence is not emptiness, it's precision. If a Sigma INFJ is quiet, it's not because they're unsure. It's because they've already seen enough. Their silence isn't empty. It's strategic. It's protective. It's filled with discernment, pattern recognition, and emotional calculation. They don't raise their voice. They raise their frequency. And not everyone can hear it. So the next time they say nothing, understand this. They are not lost. They're anchored. Not absent, aware. Not passive, powerful. This is the power of saying nothing. And for the Sigma INFJ, it speaks volumes.